about 10 to 15 people. This was not the response I expected, but I think we can work with a smaller crowd, which means that I'll get better responses, as someone already said. Um, the main aim behind this session was to get people to think about science communication as something that is very, very fundamental to how you tell people about science, right? And the way this works is that when you are looking at a proper science communication strategy, often it will resemble something that we all know, we've all been doing since a very long time: storytelling. Because storytelling can come in different forms. You can do it through pictures, stories, verbally, and get people interested in what you have to say. So there is a lot of potential for storytelling in itself in SciComm, and a lot of people don't understand this. I really wanted to highlight this specific aspect because yesterday we had a lot of teams presenting their presentations on stage. We noticed that the presentation duration was for 10 minutes. So they had to jam pack their slides with almost every single thing that they did to this day, from the day they started ideating on the AIIM project, which is not the ideal way you go about doing presentations, because when you know that the other person in front of you has not been working on a specific topic for a very long time, there is always a knowledge gap that you need to cross. And you need to let them know that this is something that even they can understand. So you will have to tone down the level of technicalities in your presentation, not dumb it down, of course, but maybe avoid using jargon unnecessarily. In fact, let me talk about a small anecdote. I'll just draw a parallel from something that I've learned from being in a debate society. So what people do is that since they are thrown into a world full of debaters, they tend to adopt jargon, big words that they use as fillers, which don't have any intrinsic meaning, right? And you don't want that. And I've seen that a lot of these people also kind of use all these big words when describing something technically, be it science, be it policy, be it a critique on something that they've seen. Art critics are notorious for doing this because they tend to just say, oh, this looks great, amazing surface, impasto, amazing, and all of that. But the general audience doesn't tend to get it. So in this session, I'm going to be drawing a lot of parallels from art, reading, films towards the end of the session, and in general tie up why all of these media are great for storytelling and how one can be a better storyteller to communicate science. So why do stories matter? The podium is now open to you all. Maybe you can talk about what it matters to you. I'll just pass this around. Is this working?
Okay, so in my perspective, stories matter a lot because if you don't know the story of a person, you won't be able to know the work he did, or you won't be able to interpret in the same context as he is doing it. So yeah, the stories matter a lot. If you want to know a person, you should know his story, or if you want to know some work, you should know the entire story behind it. Only then you can understand the whole idea and the context completely.
I feel that stories, like he said, give us a lot of perspective, and they also give us a idea on how we should lead our own lives and tell us about the mistakes that other people have done. For example, one of the examples I always give is of Newton. For a large part of his life, Newton tried to turn lead into gold. That was one of his major pursuits, which is not very well known. He was an alchemist along with other people in the scientific community at that point of time. But imagine if he had put that into something that could have been more productive. But sitting here right now, we can't really say whether it was a right decision to pursue alchemy or not, because we have more information than he did. And that tells us a lot about the nature of science, as do other stories that we read or learn about.
I think stories are important as a way of experiencing. It's our only way, or one of our only ways of experiencing someone else's life or the things they went through in a way that is relatable to us. And in the long run, they matter because that is how he was talking about anecdotes about Newton and what he did, but they are the way we remember the lives of other people and what has happened, and the way we can relate to their experiences.
I feel like stories also express ideas or thoughts in a more palatable way, like someone preaching versus learning about someone's success story. The success story is actually more likely to inspire you and motivate you than someone just saying, do this, do that.
Absolutely. So we will see through the course of, I think, 7 more slides that I have here, how you can essentially transform the way you communicate science to audiences. Um, yeah, almost all of these are famous paintings, I would say, starting from that cave painting in France to Pablo Picasso's masterpiece over there. Not a masterpiece of a person, but I would say masterpiece in general. And then you have the girl with the pearl earring. This is a Vermeer, and then this is Van Gogh, his own self-portrait, and of course Da Vinci's Mona Lisa. So if you look at it, you can always see that there is a story that each of these images are conveying. And you might be wondering why I'm talking about art and painting before talking about science communication. But the messages that both of these fields hold are essentially the same messages. You're looking at a painting, so you don't know the story behind why this painting was actually done. Why did somebody commission it? Did somebody actually like make them? Um, did they have to do this painting because they didn't have money to support themselves? Um, and why did Van Gogh have such a pensive expression on his face when he was painting his own self-portrait? Why does the Mona Lisa actually follow you around when you're walking through the Louvre? So all of these questions are something that you don't know the answers for. If you have historical accounts of certain things, you will know that maybe, that person was asked to draw it for somebody else. It was commissioned for them maybe. But unless there is some form of documentation, unless there is some form of a graph maybe, you don't know if that person understands where that particular graph is coming from. You will have to explain to them the context behind why certain parameters are high, why certain parameters are low, and what is the rationale, what is the final interpretation that they can get out of that specific graph. So when you are also doing poster presentations, right, when you're communicating the data that you have, the research data that you have, what often happens is that you load something with a lot of information. You don't make it audience specific. So if you know that your audience is a group of 5-year-old kids, you cannot start with showing a huge graph and telling them, oh, this is what it means, throwing bombastic words and asking them to understand what it means is a tall ask, because they are not the audience that you're targeting. So a huge component of science communication which draws from art is that you talk in terms of your audience. You look at your audience, you see if they are someone who can comprehend the meanings, the hidden meanings behind a particular form of science communication, then you tailor it accordingly. Now, the reason why this is so important is because it is essentially ensuring the better assimilation of the science that you want to convey, getting more people interested in the research that you want to do. It is building curiosity, and I think building curiosity is the first step that you can to get people more interested in science. And this is fundamental in fields like public health, where you are messaging something actively for people to understand. Let's say you have a vaccine and you're trying to tell people why they should take the vaccine and dispel any kind of misnorms, taboos about the vaccine. The easiest way I can do that in, say, areas where people are from a rural background would be to signal in their own language, being more inclusive and making scientific concepts simple for them to digest in a story that is something that they will be able to digest easily. So a common theme runs across all of these points that I've just said. You look at your audience, you see if they are somebody who can understand what you're trying to put forward. If not, change it. And that's what Richard Feynman also was heavily underscoring through his way of teaching physics. If you have a complex concept, try simplifying it and explaining it to someone. You understand the concept fully only if you are able to make somebody understand the concept fully. And that's how you are communicating the knowledge that you gain to a person. And oftentimes this process is difficult because we ourselves don't understand a certain concept properly to actually properly explain it to somebody who's wanting to understand what a certain phenomenon means. And I think it's crucial here to note that when you are talking about science communication, um, a large part of it, a large part of the importance that stems from it comes from the communication aspect of it. And this is why, even if you are technically sound, you also need to develop the ways in which you can communicate this to audience and see if they are interested. Because a lot of science gets lost. A lot of good science is lost in the laboratories. You have people doing amazing research, but you don't have a bridge that connects people, the scientists, the people working in academia, to people who are just not in the realm of their research. They don't have the technical know-how, but they would like to learn about the project. So you do that by making things simpler for them, making it digestible, and that is where storytelling comes in. You can do it through images. For example, if you look at these journals, the first one belongs to Madame Curie, still radioactive. You can see how there are pictures, there are graphics, doodles, a lot of information that they've noted down during the course of an experiment. Of course, the handwriting is a little illegible, but a proper, you can see that the experiment was documented in a certain way, and it often tells you a story about how it was discovered or the updates that led to the scientific development from the top of that page, from I think 19 Jan, I think that's what it means, I think it's in French, 19th Jan to whatever this is. Similarly, these are from the recently found, by recent, I'm not sure how recent, but this is one of the pages from Darwin's journal where he's talking about, I think, a phylogenetic tree. It looks like that. And he's just written down whatever he felt like writing in the book. And as you can see, in the first step of doing research, they are not relying extensively on getting everything perfect. Rather, you're looking at telling something to yourself, a story which you can understand. And I believe the first step in communicating science is getting yourself to understand what you're doing, clearly seeing where your research is going or where your probable hypothesis is going, and see if you can clearly note it down or devise ways for yourself to understand it completely. And that is where storytelling comes in, because all of these are stories. These were documented by the scientists for their own understanding, but now as we see it, we also see that this helps us form a critical understanding of where a specific research was heading and how much it has progressed from the day it was conceptualized. Okay, so cool stories and why we retain them better. If you've noticed, a lot of us prefer going through comics or infographics rather, no? Okay, you might be the oddity, but okay, so when I was preparing this PPT yesterday, right? I don't like preparing PPTs at all. I think they are a waste of time, but I still did this, and it hardly has any text on it because I don't like putting a lot of text on PPTs. Most people don't read them, so why do I even bother to put text, right? Maybe one line that they are able to read, and then the rest they just skip through. So again, when you are making presentations, right, when you are communicating science, additional tips for people who were presenting yesterday, when you have a stipulated time period where you have to present something, let's say you have like a slide deck of 15 slides and you have to go through it in about, say, 8 minutes. What you do is you don't put a lot of text. There is a standard golden rule that says that you put only 4 or 5 bullet points on one slide. But I see people putting so much, info dumping so much that the essence of what they're trying to convey hardly reaches the audience, and that is where um, a lot of things become unclear. Is this research complex, or is the person making the research complex, right? So a good way I would like to bring the medium that we have for communicating science, right? We have comics, we have infographics, maybe magazines that are able to simplify complex scientific jargon to us. And then you have, of course, the technical papers, research papers, policy documents. All of these are more technical and need more of your uh, energy and time to understand. So you condense all of it if you are to present again. Yesterday it was teams presenting to the judges. So it was assumed that the judges had a level of understanding to get what a specific scientific topic would look like. So they were all generalists, right? So they could understand a lot of these things, not in a very deep manner, but at least very good to a certain surface level. When you are presenting to a different audience, let's say you have people from computer science who have no idea about what DNA is, because that's untrue, but uh, let's say you're explaining a process, let's say you're explaining translation to somebody who's from mechanical engineering. You will have to address that specific topic through their lens. You cannot just say, you can't just throw biological terms at them, but maybe in their own dictionary, they have certain mechanical engineering analogs for all these biological terms. So you'll be speaking using those terms, and the easiest way to make something, to put forward a point, would then be to assume a storytelling format. Maybe liken your DNA to a box, or let's say, or even better, you can liken your DNA to a vehicle or a car that they're working on, and you can make them picture the number of genes on the DNA to be passengers in a train or passengers in a car. And that's how they understand that it essentially carries genetic information from one generation to the other generation. Simple, but effective. And that's why cool stories matter, and this is why we retain information better when we are presented with visual information without a lot of text. A little bit of context maybe, but not a lot of text. Okay, so I want to make this an open session. The reason why you see these three posters is because they're all super cool science communication. I think film in general is a very super cool science communication medium. But the reason why these three films have been highlighted is because they made me interested in a field I was not interested in earlier, just because I saw the film. And I thought, you know what, maybe we can try exploring what these films are talking about. For example, how many of you have read The Martian, not watched The Martian? Okay, I see 2 hands going up. How many of you managed to complete the book? Okay, perfect. For me, it's a different case because so Mark Watney, right, the protagonist, is supposed to be a botanist, but he's also he's been chosen for this Mars program. He gets stranded on Mars, of course, and the posters clearly say that we have to bring him back. But I started with the book. I started reading The Martian about, I think, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I'm not very sure. I didn't complete the book. I ended up very close to completing it. I finished it about on the 300 mark, and I just left it because I was not interested at certain point. Because sometimes the book becomes heavy on jargon, and as somebody who was not interested in space, that kind of put me off. However, I was interested in the parts where he was growing potatoes on Martian soil, because that was something very close to me. That's biological, and I found it pretty fascinating. So I went ahead and checked if you could really grow potatoes on Mars, because I wanted to know how much of it was fiction and how much of it was speculative fiction. Realized that a lot of it was speculative, but reading that 3/4 part of the book made me think a little more critically about space exploration, science, and how tech is being used for possibly looking at resource utilization in space. So somebody who had no background in, say, like mechanical engineering, space, aeronautical engineering, a book like this, a medium like this, is actually making them interested to go and explore something that they haven't. That's the beauty of storytelling. And this is not, of course, the book that's mentioned here, it's the movie. And I feel like in this case, the movie was better than the book. Um, for multiple reasons, because I could actually see what was going on. I had a very hard time visualizing the Mars rovers and the landing gears and how he had to travel from one place to another. In fact, he was using solar panels when he was traveling, and he had to like charge these solar panels frequently, and he had to prevent the Martian soil from accumulating on these panels at a lot of places. So I found it difficult to envision how this tech looks, even though it exists. I was too lazy to go and search on the internet for every single page, because it was very, very detailed, good for Andy Weir, but I found it difficult to understand what he was talking about. You know, the movie really helped me see how the tech works and how space works, and the way he was farming, you know, Martian soil for potatoes, and how he used to chuck potatoes outside because that would preserve them because of the low ambient temperatures outside the space shuttle. So again, when it comes to storytelling, right, your visuals matter. When you are communicating something to somebody, I would rather say put an image rather than text, because text takes time to read. Whereas visuals, you can just look at them and you can get at least a fundamental or like a basic crude understanding of what you're talking about. This is why a lot of research papers have graphical abstracts, but of late I've noticed that they use the graphical abstract as something where they can put flow charts. So you have a lot of text. What's the point? It defeats the purpose if you are putting so much text on the page. Nobody's going to read it. So when you are relaying something to somebody, you put images, prefer visuals. This is exactly the same way as why a lot of our biology teachers showed us videos of DNA and how it is being replicated, transcribed and translated, because visualizing how certain proteins move and how they bind and do certain biological activities is easier, always easier, than showing or describing certain phenomena. Similar to how the picture of the cell works. We always see a 2D image of the cell, a cross section. So often we tend to believe that the cell is flat, but it's actually round, spherical, 3D, right? So in this case, I think I understand why simplifying the text would be better, because that helps you comprehend the minute details in a specific entity. Just like how car manuals work and how you learn how to, drive a car. Again, Contagion, how many of you have watched this? Yeah, Hannah has watched it. Anybody else? Okay, so Contagion was huge, pun intended, very much intended, during the COVID-19 pandemic. Right when the pandemic emerged, people started watching this film, and a lot of people felt it absolutely scary that a film that was released 10 years, I think, before 2020 could so accurately predict how a pandemic would progress. Now, I was not interested in learning about pandemics because I was trying to actively block any kind of stimuli that was coming in, because I didn't want to experience the pandemic. I felt cooped up. I was supposed to go to college. I was cooped up at home, fighting with my parents, which I didn't want. So the film, and I made it a point to watch the film afterwards. I think I watched it 4 months back. And I found out that the level of technical details and descriptions that they have provided are very, very scientifically accurate. You learn about how you have patient zero, how a patient zero emerges, and how you can essentially have a different R0 value, how quickly a virus can spread through a population, and what happens if we don't have enough backup PP kits, diagnostic kits, bed capacity in hospitals. We quickly get overwhelmed because of the surge in cases, which were all things that we saw during the pandemic. For somebody who had no idea about how a pandemic response happens, how viruses spread, that movie again was a great eye-opener. because rather than reading about the process, I felt that the way they told the story, right from how the virus emerged to how it was curbed using vaccines, effective storytelling literally tells you a very complex process in a way that's very digestible. That film does it really well. Of course, the last film is Interstellar. You all must have watched. How many of you watched it? I haven't watched it. Yeah, this is true. I haven't watched Interstellar, but I know for a fact that a lot of people who watched that film became very interested in exploring about black holes and how space and time work around black holes. And I was pretty confused. I would like to confess that I've watched only clips from Interstellar because it's a 3 hour film, I think, and I am always on the fence when films exceed 1.5 hours because that's my attention span. I have to break these films and watch them as episodes later. So again, that film really opened a lot of people's eyes to make them explore a little bit more about space and time. Maybe made them more interested in physics. Unfortunately, can't say the same about me because I've generally been averse to physics. But again, the amount of uh, the drama that you see in the film is a little bit more than what you can expect from a Nolan film. But that also conveys the scientific gravity of the situation better. You see that there's his father who's exploring outer space to find something that can be valuable for human beings, and then you see the daughter age on Earth, and it's heart wrenching, but it puts forward the point about how time never stops here. And then you see that time slows down there. So all these concepts, these scientific concepts, these film espouse for, they are worth a thought, and and that's why storytelling matters here. You are quickly drawn into these stories because of how easily they can make a connect with you. That's one important thing. That's a bottom line for any form of science communication. How quickly can you form a connect with your audience? If I'm talking to a bunch of people who are well versed with artificial intelligence, not that I am, I can still talk to them, learn their inputs from how AI can be applicable for biology. And maybe they have different takes, different opinions. So essentially, when you are looking at science communication, you tell a story to people and you see if the story makes logical sense, and you see if they're understanding the said story. This is a very, I think this artist is pretty popular, Tom Gold. You will see a lot of his comics on Instagram and other social media platforms. Okay, I'd be happy to explain my research. Do you want the short, simplified version that you can actually understand, or the complete, bewilderingly complex version that you can pretend to understand? How many of us actually understand quantum physics? Does Yes. What are you majoring in? What do you plan to major in? Do you have any plans? Yeah. See? So the thing is, I think a lot of things that you are interested in are complex. And it doesn't help when scientists make the process even more difficult by putting firewalls that can prevent understanding. So instead of just saying um, very simple sentences, what they do is they use complex sentences to beat around the bush and completely change the meaning of things, which you don't want. You want more and more people to be interested in what you're saying. And as a fact, this is a very, very true phenomenon in today's academia circles and research circles, because they think that gatekeeping information can really help exert some form of dominance over upcoming scientists, which is patently untrue. Okay, as I constantly kept mentioning throughout the presentation, you have science communication, you have good stories, and then how good stories can make good science communication. You will see two boxes here. You will have to prefer doing what is on your right, and you will have to avoid doing what is on your left. Oh, I changed it. Yeah. Anyway, so you have to be audience specific, as I already mentioned. If I have 3 people who are listening to this seminar, I will not use a PPT. I will go and talk to them and see where their understanding lies. If I have maybe half of what this hall is right now, I will probably shorten the number of slides I'm having and only communicate why and the tips that they need to keep in mind when communicating science. But if I don't have anybody in the room, I will not present. And that's the thing. At times,